Hey everyone! So on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about my favorite resource books for 19th century sewing. And as you can see, I have a huge selection. I do actually want to separate them because I want to talk more about like my favorite ones first, and then just like honorable mentions. So take these ones down. Okay, so my favorite one is this one, which is Bustle Fashions, and it focuses on 1885 through 1887. Though you could easily use a lot of these to do like early bustle as well. Sadly to say, I've never found a book that solely focuses on early bustle. So this is actually by one of my favorite authors who's done a couple other books, all of which I own. Francis Grimble. I really like their books. I love their books, and the main reason why is because not only do they give you the patterns and they give you fashion plates that are similar, that they don't have pattern for, to give you just sort of creative inspiration, I guess. They also, at the very back of the book, give you, if I can find it, these. They also give you some curved ones too. And you're probably like, what is that? Okay, so those are the tools, historical tools that they used during this time period to upscale the patterns to fit people. So what it's called is, it is called, blah, blah, blah. And you should have had the appropriate page dog-eared, but you didn't. So for the earlier 1800s to, well, really up until almost the 20th century, they used something called apportioning scales. And this is what this book follows, along with pretty much all the books previous in their series. And I'm sure you guys have probably heard of that. What I also liked about this is the directions they used made it very easy to understand. I have another book that tried to explain it to me, and I was like, no, I don't get it. But reading this one, I'm like, I get it, I understand it better, and I just think they did a really good job. Now, I admit most of the book is excerpts from magazines from that time period. I believe like the biggest one is I'm probably saying it wrong, Delineator, which, funny enough, is Butterick. They do not give most of their patterns, but they do have their fashion plates. And the one that they get most of their the one that they get most of their patterns from is National Garment Cutter Instruction Book. And they also have one other source they use a lot. I'm trying to find it, and I just can't find it. But yes, what's also kind of nice is they'll go through, like, they sectioned out their books into, like, you know, they usually start with undie things. They do not go through corsets, and I will talk about what corset book I highly recommend, but that's later on in the video. They go over, like, you know, the bodices, walking skirts, full-on ensembles, polonaise, yada yada. But then each of their books at the later part talks about like trimmings, different ways to take like one skirt pattern and trim it in multiple ways to get a variety of looks, which I think is really cool. I just think that this is great for inspiration, for patterns, for pattern drafting, and this is definitely my favorite one. Sometimes I just start reading it, even though I've probably looked through it and read it a ton of times. So this one's my favorite, and runner-up, which is actually like the bigger sister of it, is same thing by Frances Grimble. This one actually has 57 patterns. I'm sorry, that first one has 41 patterns. This one has 57 patterns, and this is from 1888 to 1889, called the Directoire Revival Fashions. And quite honestly, there's still a lot of like bustle dresses in here, which is what I like. So I basically have 2 books of bustle gowns, which is my favorite Victorian look. Other ones that they did is they did the Reconstruction era fashions, which is really, this one's interesting. It's 1867 to 1868. This was at a very unusual time period for fashion, I think, because it's when they were making that slow transition from what we know as the Civil War era, where they had their huge crinolines and it was all around poofy, and they were slowly transitioning, as you can kind of see from the pictures, where skirts started getting a bit slimmer in the front but still sticking out in the back, because they were slowly transitioning into the early bustle era, which hit, of course, just 2 years later after this book focuses on, which is like 1870. And I like this. There are definitely some dresses of fashion plates I've seen that are from this time period, and I still do like these looks a lot. So, 3rd book. And then their final book I haven't gotten too much into really looking at just yet, which is The Voice of Fashion. And this one focuses on turn of the century looks. So, I think they do. Now, this one's kind of interesting because they have to do diamond cutting for your pattern making. Same thing though, they've put in all the necessary measurements, and this one scares me. Like, it's like so much more complex looking. But I just think that's great that they actually have the printout version, versions of the accurate tools they used to use then, and you can print them out and like put them on cardboard and you have the tools, which I just think is awesome. I think that's awesome and I love it. So say though that you're the kind of Victorian gal who didn't live during the bustle era or the turn of the century. Say you're that Civil War gal or romantic era. So I do have a few suggestion books for that. Quite small comparison, as you can see, but I will say the price is like less than those, but I'm sorry, like those are my favorite. Those are my favorite. But this is great. It has 60 Civil War era fashion patterns. The thing about this one that's interesting, while it does mostly focus on women's clothing, it has kids' clothing. It has and some men's clothing. Not sure. They don't really. They talk a bit on how to, pattern and stuff. Again, it's really the best Civil War one I've found. While not my favorite, it's the best one I've found for Civil War. Now, if we are talking about more 1890s to like 1900s, then I do have there's a wide variety selection of books from that time period, to be totally honest. I already talked to you guys about my favorite one, which is The Voice of Fashion by Frances Grimble. But there are other selections, and we're going to talk about those. So, first on the list is Victorian Fashion Patterns, a complete ladies' wardrobe. And this is definitely like focusing more on, very specifically, I think it's pretty much, 1890, pretty specifically. What's interesting about this book, I do believe it uses the same diamond cutting, like that's what you're supposed to use to upscale these, is that diamond cutting. So you might want to get that book so you have the tools to make these patterns. And what I find interesting about this one is it goes through and I think it goes through a few years, because I think it starts with it seems to start with 1890s And then by the end of the book, you kind of get to, oh boy, 1891. What's interesting though is it does tell you like this would have been a spring 1891 look. This would have been a fall 1891 look. And because it doesn't go through quite so much, it does go through a variety of what you should wear, like what should be in your wardrobe, like tea gowns and, you know, street costumes, evening wear, blah blah blah. And I do like Kristina Harris, but at the same time it's just not high up there. In the intro they do have some interesting like little tidbits of information. For instance, my favorite part is walking dresses cost from $50 to $300. Ball dresses are frequently imported from Paris and cost from $500 to $1,000. Then there are traveling dresses, dresses in black silk, in poignée, velour, in pique, which range in price from $75 to $175. Which I think is interesting because we don't really think about, like, we know what our stuff is going to cost, but we don't really think about like what dresses would have cost back then for people. So I did think that was interesting. Not like my top choice, but it is a good resource book to have. Then we have another one that hits around the 1890s, which is 59 Authentic Turn of the Century Fashion Plates. And this is kind of interesting. I would think I'd actually would rank this one above that last book. Here's what it is. Though they don't really tell you what years these patterns came out like the other one did. But, you know, oh no, yeah they do. I'm sorry. So this is basically a good book to pick up right after this one because it's like 1890, 1891. And this picks up right at 1891 and pretty much goes through to 95, it looks like, 1895. So if you wanted to do the whole like 1890s looks, these would be a good two to have because they kind of pick up right after each other, which is cool. I think that's kind of cool. So then we have another turn of the century look. She's got her whole pigeon chest going on. Woo! And this is literally called Turn of the Century Fashion Patterns and Tailoring Techniques. And I don't know about this one. This one scares the heck out of me. I mean, look how complicated that is. I don't know, I think it just kind of spooks me because there aren't a whole lot of pictures of what you're even making. It's just like, here's the pattern, good luck. And you're like, well, what does it look like? So I actually will rank this very low down on my choice list. But it's worth a mention, and you may not be intimidated by it. Now though, I want to talk about really my second favorite book after the whole Frances Grimble collection, which is Historical Pattern Archive. Women's Clothing from 1837 to 1969. The reason I'm mentioning this last though is because it does hit a huge range. But what I find absolutely awesome about this book is these are real dresses. So basically what they did to make this book is they got real dresses donated, some of them that were on their last legs, and they basically were able to draft patterns off of the original dresses. And I really love it because they do go in chronological order, so it starts like back, I think, you know, the first dress would be that 1837 one, and then it just goes in order from there. But what's interesting is they tell you, like, the pictures are black and white, but they do tell you what it was colored. Like, they'll say this was purple and white striped cotton calico dress, which, no, not the calico you're probably thinking of, which is not real calico. Like, I think you can only get real calico fabric from like Britain now. It's like almost impossible to find in America. And they talk about, they have like a little bit under where they mention it. So like they'll say this dress is completely sewn by hand. Obviously it was made in 1840. The unboned bodice is flat lined with white cotton twill and closes at center front with 9 flattened brass hook and eyes. And then they have the pattern pieces. Now, the way you're supposed to scale this one's a little, not super difficult. Like, you'll need grid paper, or pattern paper, I should say, that's like got grids on it. Because I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but it is on a grid scale, and they have the pattern drawn on the grid scale, and the grids basically are supposed to be an inch in real life. So each grid should actually be an inch by an inch, which I don't find this too intimidating, because if you get the right paper, it should be fairly simple to be able to upscale it. And a lot of the skirt portions are big squares. So, and they do tell you how to kind of sew it. I actually think this might even be better instructions on how to sew things. What's really fascinating too is all of these real dresses. Pretty much every pattern in here, until I think like maybe past the 1900s, has pockets. And I know that I've seen like people talking about, you know, the hidden pockets of historical clothing. I just thought that was so fascinating. This book is just a great read, because it's even if you're like not going to pattern stuff, I just think this is an awesome book to have in your collection, because these are real dresses from those times. And you know, they tell you about the fabrics they're made of, you know, the techniques that were used. There are a few dresses in here I just won't touch, because they admit, and at least they do tell you, that the dress had been altered, and because probably somebody bought it like, you know, 1 decade, and then they said it looked like it had been altered. A lot of times the alterations were in the sleeves to fit more what would then be modern fashion. But I think this book is awesome. Obviously all the other books follow real fashion plates from those time periods, but I just think this is cool, because a fashion plate is a design, and while it is from the time period, it may not have, you know, fashion plates can glamorize things to an extent. Just like, that'd be like someone saying, oh, I'm looking in this magazine from, you know, 2002, and gosh, people were really thin and like wore these fancy clothes. Well, no, we really didn't. Like, I don't know, I just love this book. It's a good read, and it's just historically very fascinating to me. So after the Frances Grimble books, I put this definitely up there as a you should have in your collection. But we're not done yet. There's just one more book, which I mentioned earlier, which is the oh so necessary corset book. Now, I know there's another book that everyone raves on and on and on about, but it's like really expensive. So this is like a much better option in my opinion, because it's affordable. And again, like the last book we were talking about, this is just historically interesting, because these are real corsets in museums that they're talking about, and that they have been able to examine and draft patterns. And why I find this very interesting is because I never thought some of the fabrics that were used for some of these corsets were well used. I didn't even think about it, you know. And what's great is it's not just for Victorian style corsets. They even have stays, which is really awesome. So basically, well, it's awesome for me because the historical periods that I'm looking for is like late 1700s pretty much through to like Edwardian times. So like over 100 years. But like they show, they have a corset that's like, let's see, it's just fascinating. I'm trying to find one. Like they have some that would be like the gold exalted corset, and they have a picture of it. They talk about, they really get into talking about the corsets, like what it's made of, where it's from, you know, I mean, and then like they'll go on and give you patterns. And I think it's a lot like that other one too, where it's on a grid scale, so you don't necessarily need any special tools. I really Oh, here's one that's fascinating. A blue jean corset. I didn't know. Maybe I'm the only person who didn't know this, but they made corsets out of blue jeans? Or blue jean fabric, I should say. I don't know, I thought that was interesting. That's a 1890 to 1910 corset. They're not 100% sure on the year. I want to make this one. This is like 1890s corset. Oh, isn't that just beautiful? That's gorgeous. So gorgeous. I really want to make a replica of that. So that's it. Those are all my books, at least that I'm recommending for the 19th century. I do have other books that are not so much 19th century, but these are like my top books. I will list in the description all of the books that I have shown you guys, and again, it really just depends on what part of the Victorian era that you're really looking to do. That's why I wanted to give you a wide selection and a wide variety, you know, starting, I admit, other than this historical one, I couldn't find any books on like the early 1800s. So if you're wanting like early 1800s look, this would definitely be the book to go with, because it's the only one that really talks about those kind of dresses, and you can modify the patterns to probably fit your needs. But other than that, I mean, most of these books, pretty much, I've got a very good selection all the way up from the Civil War to like 1910. So I love these books. These are my babies. These are my collection. And I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that maybe this has given you some helpful tips on what books would fit your needs. And if not, hopefully you just had a good time today. I know I did, and I know I can ramble on about some of these books. I'm just very enthusiastic about them, and some of them make me oh so happy. They make me so happy. Alright guys, so as always, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye bye.